And this really is for the young men that watch this show.
I was the youngest and first student pilot to fly solo across the country, which I did at 16.
World record, by the way.
Yeah, which still holds.
This is Center, 7 Air, 5891 Juliet.
5891 Juliet, Memphis International, altimeter 3022, verify 6,600.
Yes, that's correct. Affirmative.
November 91 Juliet, I have you going to Sierra Uniform Zulu, is that correct?
Affirmative. 91 Juliet.
I show you well left the course.
Yeah, I'm correcting for that. 91 Juliet.
November 91 Juliet, contact Memphis Center 125.85. November 5891 Juliet, contact Memphis 125.85.
This is 7 Air.
Anyway, head off 10 miles west. Yeah.
The hell, Mark.
NTSB report regarding the Jenny Blaylock crash. The crash took place December 7th of 2023, a little over 2 years ago. You know Jenny as TNFlygirl or TNFlygirl as she was on YouTube with all of her videos. Listen in to the last transmission she made just prior to the crash. This was an absolutely preventable crash.
This is Center, 7 Air, 5891 Juliet.
5891 Juliet, Memphis International, altimeter 3022, verify.
Now, Jimmy, you're familiar with flight calls and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
6,600.
Yes, that's correct. Affirmative.
So she's checking in now with the air traffic controller. This is called VFR flight follow. And so she's flying from Knoxville downtown to Saline County Airport, 430 nautical miles. In the airplane that she's in, it's a Bonair. It's a Beechcraft Bonair. It's kind of a hot rod of an airplane, and that's going to factor in here. She's 430 miles, couple of hours for her to get there. And she's flying with her dad.
So, Jimmy, first off, what does it take to get a private pilot's license?
Okay, so you can start taking lessons at any age. There's no age limit to that. The FAA rules and regulations state that you cannot have your first solo flight, which is to fly the aircraft by yourself, no one else on board, until your 16th birthday. You cannot take the FAA flight exam. You have to take a written and a flight exam, but you can't become an FAA licensed pilot until you're 17. So in between that window of 16 and 17, you can fly solo. It's kind of like having a provisional driver's license. You can't have anybody else on board the aircraft with you. They had brought up VFR, which is visual flight rules. Any trip you do, you need to go over with your instructor. The instructor needs to sign off on it. So, a couple questions I would have on this, and I apologize for not being more informed on this exact story.
No, this is good.
But
yeah.
it doesn't sound like the father was a licensed pilot. He may have been. I don't know.
No, he wasn't.
So he wasn't. So did she have a pilot's license, or was she? The fact that you can.
Now, let me ask you this: how on an average? And this is just based. This is me asking you just blindly.
Sure.
About how many hours do you need? One, for your first solo flight, and then two, for a private pilot's license.
I should know this on the rules and regs. I want to say the minimum is 20, and I could be off on this by a couple hours, but I want to say it's 20 hours dual, which is with an instructor. It's 20 or 40. And I want to say it's around 60 hours combined, which is your time with an instructor plus your solo time in order to take the FAA flight exam. A lot of it has to do with how comfortable you are. It's there are minimums again, but it's really your instructor, his feel for how you're doing, how good you are with the aircraft.
An interview with one of the pilot's former flight instructors was conducted. The instructor stated that she leaned on technology too much and did not have solid stick and rudder flying skills. Regarding the system on the airplane, specifically the trim that we've been discussing, and autopilot, she stated that she would often confuse the trim direction and would manually adjust the trim in the wrong direction. The instructor stated, for instance, she could get flustered if that trim was in the wrong position. If the autopilot was not happy, she would just disconnect it and fly manually. On the autopilot, she would press the down and up button repeatedly. I would just tell her to gently press and hold the button down. She would repeatedly push it.
The reason why that remark hits me so hard, so I got into flying back in 1993. I was the youngest and first student pilot to fly solo across the country, which I did at 16 in 1994.
World record, by the way.
Yeah, which still holds. At the time, going back, cell phones didn't really exist. GPS was not a thing for civilian use. So when I did that trip, I really was going off of compass, dead reckoning. There's an instrument on board an aircraft called a VOR, but it was very primitive on navigating that trip. I guess 1998-ish, I got married and flying's very expensive. I didn't fly for about 10 years. When I got back into it, the amount of the technology that had advanced on these small aircrafts, you now have GPS glass cockpits, you have autopilot, and exactly what that instructor was talking about. Complacency may be the wrong word, but it became easier to rely on the plane
Mm.
to do what you had to do as a pilot before. And with that, you saw more infractions on blowing through airspace, on flying in weather that you probably, you're right on the
Really?
line. Yeah. And so it's a double-edged sword, right? Like with this progression of technology, at some point there's safety that comes with it, but it just makes you a little more gutsy and a little more complacent. And that's why that remark from the instructor really, really kind of hit me, because I remember when I would have to put together a flight plan as a student pilot. I mean, I literally was using like a metal compass and
Wow.
doing the math on a scratch pad, and you'd put together a flight plan. You'd be looking at a paper map. These things didn't exist. You would have checkpoints every 15 nautical miles. You may be looking for a water tower, railroad tracks, intersecting highways. Now it's the same way you drive a car. You hop in the plane, you put in a destination. There's a line. You follow the line, and off you go. And yeah, it makes it easier, and autopilot in some way makes it safer until it doesn't, right?
This is talking about how long she was training to be a pilot.
In October of 2021, a full 8 months later, is when she gets her private pilot's license. On May 14th, 2022, she passed her private pilot single engine land practical test, at which time she had accumulated 193.2 hours of total flight time. Of those hours, 182, all but 10, were dual instruction received. Nearly all of the hours were accumulated in the Piper, the smaller airplane, the Corolla I told you about earlier, that she had purchased in June of 2021. So now she upgrades to this Beechcraft Bonaire, this hot rod, and she wasn't even ready for the Piper.
It's going to get to my point, right? So she has money to buy a plane.
You just answered your own question. By the
She
way.
has money to buy a plane. She's flown with an instructor
Right.
for 193 hours before she gets her private pilot's license. And earlier you shared it, and BJ in the chat shared 45 to 60 hours
Right.
generally before you get your private pilot's license. Now, and you guys mentioned 20 before you're starting flying solo, right?
And that's minimal, right?
Yeah, minimum 20 before you're considering flying solo. And she's had 193 hours. 82 of them were with an instructor. Out of that 193 hours, only 10 were solo flights.
Wow.
Yeah, obviously she has means. That's a lot of flight time in a short amount of time, and the fact that she graduated to a high performance aircraft. This is the reason why you hear so many tragic stories in aviation with with rich people and famous people getting into aviation accidents, because for most people it's incredibly expensive at any level, but you're limited to the type of plane that you're flying because of financial reasons,
Yep.
right? The thing is, the more expensive the planes get, the quicker things happen. They go faster, they're less forgiving. And the only way to have experience is by gaining experience. And
Yep.
most people, there's a progression, and you have to build up the hours. And usually, you go from being a private pilot to getting your instrument rating to possibly commercial. You may be a flight instructor to help build up time, and just with that comes life experiences, right?
Yep.
So the thing with aviation, I'm also into boating a lot, and there's a lot of parallels between boating and aviation. But the biggest thing with aviation is when something goes wrong and you need to problem solve, you can't stop the plane. You can't pull it over to the side of the road. You can't drop anchor. So you need to be able to multitask and fly the plane, number one, okay? Problem solve what the issue is. But there's an old saying in aviation: when something goes wrong, you have to aviate, navigate, communicate. But the biggest thing is you got to keep that airplane flying. And when things go wrong, they usually go wrong pretty quickly. It doesn't mean that they're not very solvable problems, right? Like, so whenever I would take a passenger up, their biggest concern, number one question was, what happens if the engine stops?
Yep.
A single engine airplane, that's everybody's biggest fear. And my response to that was, how many engines does the space shuttle have when it's landing?
0.
It's zero. It's the world's biggest collider. So as Captain Sully on the Hudson, as long the plane will fly, unless you stall it. So as long as you have your composure and you're able to aviate while you're problem solving, while you're also in communication with air traffic control, communicating what the problem is, using them to, like with Captain Sully, get vectors to what may be the closest airport or a field, clearing traffic away
Yep.
from you, notifying other planes, also understanding, and this may sound, silly, but knowing exactly where you are. All this stuff is happening in real time. And plus, you're a human being, so you have the emotion of, oh crap,
Yeah.
right? And it's like anything. The only way you get good at anything is by doing it. So when you have these younger, inexperienced pilots that are flying planes that they probably shouldn't be, it's a recipe for disaster. JFK Jr. is probably one of the greatest examples of this, by the way.
Yeah.
When I did the cross country flight, there was a lot of conversations going back and forth. It would still be solo, but if I would have a trailing plane behind me.
Yeah.
And again, they can't help you inside the cockpit if something goes wrong, but it still felt like even just having that plane that could help you with navigation or problem solving, and we did it totally solo at the time.
That's crazy, man. How
Yeah.
was that, man? Like, because people don't understand really how real, like, crazy that is. How old you were 17, 16?
16. So I did
You were
it as
16.
yeah.
You went up in the air across country from
So
Ocean
it
City, Maryland.
from Ocean City, it took 12 days. So just the main thing is,
By yourself,
we
dude.
think of by myself. So left Ocean City, went up through Ohio, St. Louis, Kansas, Kansas City was a stop to Texas. Now, for small airplanes, and this may have changed over the years, but at the time, most of the Midwest is restricted for small planes if you're not above 10,000 feet. It's the White Sands Missile Firing Range. It's where Roswell is. So you have about a 10-mile window between the border of Mexico and this restricted airspace that pretty much goes all the way from Texas to Arizona.
I didn't know
And
that.
in a small
Didn't
plane,
know that.
yeah.
Wow.
So you gotta stay stateside. You can't go into Roswell. The desert, you would have visibility up to 100 miles. There's nothing to it all looks the same. The heat would radiate off of the desert floor, and literally the plane would hit these thermals where it would ascend hundreds of feet, clear the thermal, and then plummet back down. There's no way to train for that, obviously, on the East
Wow.
Coast. The additional training, God forbid you did lose an engine, you're out of radio contact for large portions of that. Um, and then the Rockies are most of the Rocky Mountains are higher than 11,000 feet, so a small plane can't clear it. There's a southern gap that goes into Los Angeles where literally the mountains are above, we're flying at 10,500, come through the Rockies, and you're in LAX airspace as a student pilot, and then landed in
Oh,
Long
that's
Beach,
crazy.
California. So it was, and I got
That is
lost.
crazy.
And I got lost at one point also. So that was fun.
But wasn't it like a freeing experience though? Like after you did that, did you feel like you can do anything?
Yeah, it was really it was incredibly challenging, and it was intimidating. It really was, because you're learning things about flying that there's no way to train for. I remember I spent 2 weeks up in Martinsburg, and like we would do low flights over the Appalachians, just trying to simulate as much as we could. Part of the reason why the trip took 2 weeks in Plano, Texas, I went up 2 or 3 times with a flight instructor just to have some experience over desert flying. But again, when I did the actual trip, I was solo on that. Same thing in Palm Springs. I went with an instructor through the southern gap of the Rockies to just have the experience of doing it when I did the part of the trip. I did that solo also.
Yep.
But just also the ability to build the flight time training for it. Toyota sponsored it. So it was a
Oh,
way
really?
to,
Okay.
talking about building the hours. But at the same time, there were a lot of companies that wanted nothing to do with it. There were aviation organizations that were very much outspoken about it. In the beginning, the FAA wasn't very fond of it. It was always within the rules and regulations for it to be illegal. Everybody had a change of heart once wheels were down in Long Beach.
There we go.
But but it was an amazing experience, and really a very unique way. I've never driven across country, but anybody that's done that says how cool it is to experience America that way,
Yeah.
and just the way the landscape of America changes, and to and to view that from 10,000 feet.
Remind the FAA that if it's not illegal, then it's appropriate. But I want to show this, right? Because I want to make the point why this is crazy too. He's going to share a chart of those final few moments, and I want to get you to react to the chart as well.
While descending and slowed while climbing. That means she wasn't doing anything with the power. If she was climbing, the airplane lost.
So what she was doing,
She
it's presumed that she had the autopilot engaged for this for a majority part of the flight. Now, part of the story, again, earlier it says she relies a lot on technology. When she's not able to use the technology, she tries to fly the plane manually, but still doesn't have a firm grasp of stick and rudder skills. So in this airplane that she's in is basically like a hot rod. So it's like moving the way Captain Steve puts it. It's like going from a Corolla to going to a Supra. Right. So the plane that she bought was much more plane that she could handle. She depended a lot on the automations. So autopilot and some of the other technology features. She didn't fly like Jimmy flew, which was basic stick and rudder skills, knowing how planes operate, how planes fly. Her final few moments, this is what he's kind of explaining and breaking down.
Airspeed, she came down, it gained airspeed again. Airspeed fluctuated between 100 and 160 knots. I think I said 80 earlier. Here it says 100. While repeatedly gaining and losing 1,000 to 1,500.
So she's really
feet. Here's the chart now that the NTSB has given us, and you can see there are dramatic peaks and valleys in this thing between airspeed and altitude. She's climbing up and going down to 100 knots, and then the nose comes over, and she's struggling, fighting the airplane, grabbing trim, but grabbing the wrong trim and making it worse, and then pulling it out and trying to get it back and trying to engage that autopilot, and then the airplane drops down again, and up she comes again and loses airspeed. She's struggling with this for 25 full minutes to try to get control of this aircraft, and there was nothing wrong with the airplane.
Nothing wrong with the airplane.
My number one question would be at the beginning of the segment, they said that she was under VFR conditions, which is visual flight. That doesn't mean that she didn't accidentally go into instrument conditions, which is where you can easily get vertigo if you're not trained and you're not relying on your half of the instruments in the airplane are just duplicating what you can see outside. So if you're under normal visual conditions, you really don't need them because you can look out the window. However, when you get into IFR conditions, the best way to describe this is when you were a kid, if you were in a fun house at the fair, at the very end there's this spinning tunnel and you're standing on a stationary platform and it feels like you're falling down even though the platform's not moving. That's vertigo. So if you are flying an airplane and you end up in the clouds and you're not an experienced instrument pilot, which you also need a certification to fly in those conditions, a lot of pilots, and this is what happened to JFK Jr., you start going off of what your senses are telling you. So you may be flying completely straight and level, your equilibrium is all messed up, and your body's telling you that you're in a bank. So you, instead of relying on your instruments, you go ahead and you correct for that. And what you inadvertently do is you put the plane that was flying straight and level, you put it in a bank. The more a plane is banked, the less lift there is over the wings. The plane slowly starts to go down. Then you pull back to go up, you put the airplane in a spin. So that's why I'm curious if she was in bad weather or if she was just fighting. So that she was just fighting the autopilot. I mean, 25 minutes is a long time, by the way.
Yeah, she was fighting autopilot, and part of it too. I mean, if you watch the full video that Captain Steve put out, there's a lot to this story, right? A lot of elements, a lot of moving parts, and shout out to Soldiers because he's also pointing out that one of the things that the toxicology report showed is that she had several FAA prohibited drugs in her system. Really? That would have prevented, that completely bans her from, or not bans, but just you should not fly, right? You should not fly under these conditions, right? She took all these hours to fly. Right. Instructors repeatedly said that she has trouble with basic plane functions, right? If you watch through some of her videos, she also had trouble communicating over the radio. So whether it's changing frequencies, communicating, actually her calls, so she couldn't communicate, but somebody signed off on this.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There's a level of accountability with the flight instructor because in order for her to take her FAA check ride to get her private pilot's license, the instructor needs to sign off that they are comfortable with her taking the check ride.
Or how much money does it take?
Well, and again, that ties back to what I was saying earlier. Unfortunately, a lot of sad stories in aviation are a result of of people that have means that maybe aren't flying planes that they should be in. And if you listen to the air traffic control communication in the very beginning when we started talking about this, she was on a 400-mile. They call it anything over 45 nautical miles as a cross country flight. She
Mhm.
was talking to a center, which means that was a long trip. That she wasn't talking to a tower. She wasn't
Yeah.
leaving an airport or arriving at one. She was in transient. She technically didn't need to be doing that, so she was on a VFR flight following, which means you're in radar contact or shouting out traffic and giving you vectors and helping you out when necessary. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely a breakdown in the system. I mean, look, somebody that doesn't understand and isn't able to do basic stick and rudder aviation should not be taking an FAA check, right? I mean, is the reality of it, right? Like, you can't get a driver's license if you can't do a 3-point turn without hitting the cones.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yeah. So
This is you're right. This is a woman who had no business being in the air. This is somebody who, like, clearly, if she had like substances in her system, if she was bobbing and like going up and down and just like completely losing control of the plane, there's like she had no business being there. Like, and it hurts me to say that, but it just kind of is what it is.
it sounds like she was more interested in being a YouTube star than being an
Yep.
aviator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and,
Well-
and unfortunately, aviation, look, it's incredibly safe. And the number one killer in aviation is complacency. If you look at the number one cause of all engine failures is fuel starvation. It's pilot error. It's not mechanical failure. It's not catastrophic failure. So if you have somebody that is more, focused on how many clicks they're getting and how many likes than doing their primary job of, piloting the aircraft, these are the things that happen.
Yeah,
And,
right. That's right.
and it gives aviation a bad name. And for somebody that has a real love for it, it's sad. And the fact that you lost 2 lives out of this is it's horrific. So unnecessary.
So here's the moral for the story, guys, and this really is for the young men that watch this show. No matter how good looking she is, no matter how sweet she sounds, an intelligent man sets boundaries. Because if you don't, I'm telling you this, if you don't, life turns into an oscillating pattern. Up, down, until eventually you crash into Earth.
I will say this to the young men: women love pilots.